the start of the Plan Commission meeting, a joint public hearing with the Town Plan Commission and a staff representative of the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use, Planning and Zoning Division will be heard to consider a request by John and Jamie Jewell to amend the Waukesha County zoning map from the A2 to the R3 residential district to match the designation of residential parcels along Taylor Woods Road. The property is located at W280N3595 Taylor Woods Road. Prior to the start of the joint public hearing, I wanted to make to state a few things. First of all, the town of Delafield has been made aware of fraudulent invoices circulating that mimic official municipal billing. Please note, the town does not email invoices. The town will never request payment by a wire transfer or ACH. The town of Delafield accepts cash or checks only. Payments may be made in person at the town hall or by mail to the official town hall address. If you receive a suspicious invoice or have any questions regarding a payment request, contact the town hall directly before taking action. This happened to someone in our town. We don't want it to happen to anyone else. So do not pay anything by wire transfer. And if there are any questions whatsoever about an invoice, I don't care if it says it's due today and you're late, because that's what scammers do. If there's any questions, please contact our town staff. We do not want anyone else in the town to be subject to this. So just be careful. There's a scam going around. It is very convincing. So be aware of that. And then second, for the record, the town received a petition regarding the proposed rezoning at W280N3595 Taylor's Woods Road.
Jennifer, is your mic on?
Oh, is it?
Thank you. Okay. The petition was received on May 4th, 2026, and has been shared with the Plan Commission members and the Waukesha County Coordinator. This document is being entered into the record as a public comment. The petition does not change the Plan Commission's role, which is to make a recommendation to Waukesha County. And then with respect to the public hearing today, in the event that you wish to speak, you will come up. You'll provide to our clerk, you'll provide the white piece of paper that's outside that has your name and your address. You'll state your name and your address before you speak. Anyone who is speaking either in favor or against the public hearing will do so within 3 minutes. So I'll set a timer. Everyone has 3 minutes to present their speech. Waukesha County will present first, and she will make her presentation and is not constrained as to time because she's an official. But people who are choosing to speak can do so. And the Plan Commission has received a number of pieces of correspondence, and we want to note that those were received, and there were a number of emails that were received. So, Ms. Lato, we'll
have Cassie go first.
So first, there'll be the Waukesha County representative to speak. Yeah, your name and your work address.
Okay.
Hello? Hello? Is it on?
Yes.
Okay.
It's for those in the Zoom land. They can't hear you unless you're
okay.
at a mic.
All right. Hello, my name is Cassie Slotty. I'm a senior land use specialist with Waukesha County, and the address there is 515 Westmoreland Boulevard in Waukesha. The zip code is 53188. Okay? And then we just begin?
Yeah, please proceed.
All right. So for the record, I just want to state that the rezone request is not for authorizing a new residence, not for any vegetation removal proposals. It is simply for an amendment to the zoning of the property. So just want to get that out there before we begin. The subject property is shown up on GIS. It is on the north side of Pewaukee Lake in a shallow bay. There's a large wetland complex to the north that I believe is in the holdings of Pewaukee Lake Sanitary District. More than half of the property is in wetland or environmental corridor in the northern portion. And then in the upland portion, where the residence is, there's kind of significant topography that ranges in about 15 to 25% of steep slopes. The property has access to Taylor's Woods Road via an access easement that's 40 feet wide, and it crosses over 3 properties to the southwest. So You can see where Taylor's Woods Road ends, the right-of-way where your mouse is. The remaining 40 feet to the property is an access easement. The existing improvements, if you don't mind zooming in a little bit, it's hard to see. There's a single-family residence on the property. There is a walkway to the south of the property that allows access to the lake. GIS does show a wood deck at the shore, and that has since been removed. These images are from 2024, so it's been removed since then. Do you mind turning on land use plan layer, please? The Waukesha County and Town of Delafield land use plans designate the property as low-density residential as depicted with the hatching that is similar to those properties to the south and the west. The low-density residential density requirement is 20,000 square feet to 1.4 acres per dwelling unit. So the remainder of the property in green is designated as primary environmental corridor, similarly to the other property to the south along the lake there. And then, if you don't mind, the environmental layer. All right. So as we had discussed, and Rebecca had pulled it up briefly before, a significant portion of the property is wetland. The owner has had it delineated by an assured delineator. The boundary is shown on a recent survey that we have on file, and I believe it's his most current survey. The delineation was done prior to any vegetation removal or riprap permits being issued by the DNR. I will kind of go over the chronology of the property in a little bit, because there's some confusion and kind of a history of permits being issued. There's also environmental corridor at the shore, which may or may not be a remnant of the entire property being environmental corridor due to the existing disturbance because of the home site. That might have been taken out of the EC, but due to vegetation at the shore that remains, the tree canopy, invasive species that were there, that may still be an environmental corridor. If you don't mind turning on the zoning layer, please. The rezone request today is to rezone the property from its existing A2 rural home district to the R3 residential district. As you can see, if we turn on just the zoning, all the properties to the south along Taylor's Woods Road are zoned R3. Except the subject property. The much larger properties to the north and the west are zoned A2. The zoning to the north on the subject property is also wetland and environmental corridor. Those zoning districts are proposed to remain the same. The only zoning change being proposed is the A2 to R3, which is approximately 0.79 acres. The entire property is 2.3 acres. Do you mind pulling up the chart? Sorry. All
You made
right.
the first person cry.
I did create a chart that outlines the required A2 zoning provisions and requirements for the property, the R3 requirements for its proposed rezone, and then I also included the existing lot/home location, setbacks, offsets, building footprint, just to kind of compare. You can see that almost all of the requirements for A2 and R3 are the same. The two that are different are highlighted. Essentially, an R3 rezone will offer a reduction in offset, and the building footprint, total building footprint size differs slightly. Or not slightly, but it differs. So those are the two differences. I did also create two exhibits that show the existing zoning's conforming building envelope. Yeah, so this is the conforming building envelope for today's zoning. It allows for a 612 square foot building envelope. That does not meet the required building footprint provision in the shoreline zoning code, which is 1,100 square feet. So in discussing this with the petitioner, staff had advised that he seek a rezone. The R3 conforming envelope offers a more reasonable building envelope, still 2,800 square feet. It should be noted that even with the different building footprint allowances in each respective district, this is what conforms. He would never be able to achieve a 17.5% building footprint with the constrictions or the restrictions of wetlands, essentially. I mean, even the wetlands are more restrictive than the shore. All right, so I will briefly discuss the chronology of this property coming into our office and proposals and zoning permits and violations. In 2022, we had our first correspondence with the petitioner. He had not yet owned the property, but he was reaching out to our office to inquire about a remodel of the existing residence. In 2023, he reached out again to inquire about setbacks, impervious surface, and boathouse constraints. At that time, we had informed him a wetland delineation would be required and, you know, the other requirements in the ordinance. In June of '23, he had informed us that a wetland delineation had been completed. It was noted that the report did describe shoreline erosion, and he had also asked our office about the placement of riprap. We had informed him that that's under DNR's jurisdiction. We would not do any of that sort of regulating. In November of 2023, a vegetation removal permit was issued from our office. Rebecca, could you show the site plan? The permit authorized the removal of dead and non-native trees, which are depicted in yellow, and about 2,800 square feet of invasive shrub species, honeysuckle and buckthorn. So you can imagine removing this much vegetation, it would possibly look, it's a stark difference from what would have been there initially. And this type of removal is permitted in our ordinance in the EC district and in shoreline areas with replacement. So we did receive, he did record a deed restriction. He was conditioned upon the execution of a replacement planting plan that included 7 trees and 29 shrubs of at least 3 different species. I didn't highlight those. He kind of clustered those replacement areas, but I just wanted to kind of call this out to your attention as to how it may look after this vegetation was removed. Shortly after that permit was issued, we received a complaint regarding the vegetation removal. Our office did conduct a site inspection. It appeared that he was in compliance with the zoning permit, and we just moved on. 2024, we did receive a complaint about additional tree cutting and pier rental. We determined that the tree cutting was a dead ash. It complied with the vegetation removal plan. The owner was sent a violation letter informing him that pier renting is not permitted. And I haven't heard anything else about that since, but I would assume that he did not do it that year. And then in May of 2024, a riprap general permit was issued by the DNR. So all the riprap that was placed out there was issued by the DNR. Last week, myself and, sorry, I'm getting like a bubble in my throat. Myself and the supervisor of our division, or manager of our division, visited the site and did assess the replacement plantings. Unfortunately, due to heavy deer browsing and deer rub, a lot of the pagoda dogwoods are not thriving. There were 2 replacement trees. The creeping juniper that was planted, unfortunately, appears like it is not really doing well either due to the wet conditions. And we will be working with the owners to kind of revise their replacement plan that would include more wetland appropriate species and maybe more of like a shoreline buffer area, also with species that are less resistant to deer rub and browse. Previously, our office has spoken with the petitioners, and we strongly suggested that they come up with a wetland restoration plan, it's most likely that they will need a variance for a new home, regardless of, you know, what happens today, I suppose. And we have advised them that if they do seek a variance, that they should be prepared with a wetland restoration plan. Oh yes, and the petitioners are entitled an access and view corridor, so that is something that we generally will issue a permit for an access, or require a deed restriction to be recorded that memorializes the location of an access and view corridor. We did not do that in 2023. However, with the amount of shoreline that the property has, his vegetation removal is largely within an access and view corridor that would be permitted. And that is a state statute. That is not something that we just can't permit because it's EC. And now we will move on to public comments. Our staff has received numerous emails from neighbors, concerned citizens, wildlife specialists. I'm going to just bullet out the concerns and follow up with some finishing comments. So comments from the public include the following. Shoreline of this area of Pewaukee Lake is protected and a valuable habitat for migratory and breeding birds. The environmentally sensitive shoreline and wetland constraints are not conducive to new development. The rezone will create a precedent and does not comply with the land use plan. The rezone will allow for increased density. Fire and emergency access during construction is a concern. As you can see, that his access is with an easement. There are several driveways nearby. Neighboring properties are concerned about staging for construction, where equipment will be parked and placed. So that is a concern that has been brought up. The property does not have consistent depth for recreation or accessibility for boating like other R3 properties. There was a lot of concern about the amount of vegetation removal that has occurred, and the rezone is of no benefit to the community. Our staff has reviewed the application, and we find the following to be true. As previously stated, the rezone does comply with the land use plan. You can clearly see that the yellow hatching goes up to the subject property and beyond to the west. The land use plan recommends maximum density. The subject properties can be larger than what the land use plan recommends. The environmentally sensitive areas will continue to be protected by their zoning and land use plan categories as C1 wetland and EC environmental corridor. Waukesha County does not permit structures to be located within wetlands, but in fact maintain a 75-foot setback. We really do take natural resources and riparian properties and water quality seriously, and we do our best to preserve those resources. So I just want to say that, you know, the sensitive shoreland and wetland constraints are not conducive to new development. Well, they're permitted to develop as long as they meet certain setbacks. The R3 zoning district does not require access to water bodies or aquatic recreation for residences or structures to be constructed. The subject property has historically been a residential lot with a single-family residence, and that is its continued proposal to just keep a single-family residence. No future development or increase in density or intensity is proposed as far as I'm aware. There is nothing in our ordinance or statute, I believe, that states a rezone needs to be a benefit to the community. And as discussed, permits were issued, you know, and while the replanting results are undesirable, we will continue working with the petitioner to ensure that the shoreline maintains its integrity. So that's what I have.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? I don't believe so. Okay. Anything else you'd like to say?
I don't believe so.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just want to remind everyone of the procedure with respect to how with this parcel. The subject property is located entirely within Waukesha County's Shoreline Protection Ordinance jurisdiction, the SPO. The SPO requires a joint public hearing with the Town Plan Commission and County, followed by a formal recommendation to the county for consideration. So that joint public hearing is today. Next, the County Park and Planning Commission considers the matter, including the town recommendation, and makes its own recommendation to the Land Use, Parks and Environment Committee of the County Board, LUPE, which makes a final recommendation to the County Board. The County Board makes a final decision where a simple majority vote determines outcome. State law no longer provides for a higher vote threshold with a protest. That option was removed in 2023 by Act 16. The remaining protest language, and that's the end of that comment. And so with respect to the procedure, today is the first step. There are multiple other steps, and the ultimate determination is made by the Waukesha County Board. So that's just for the procedure on what's going forward after today for everyone's information. And as I indicated, there is 3 minutes of speaking per person today. And then also, I would ask that everyone act with decorum. When there's someone speaking, no clapping, no heckling, no interruptions. We all are adults here. We're all, and everyone's good people. Everyone are good neighbors. What I would like to see is to see that in action and have everyone listen attentively and behave with decorum when someone else is speaking. So that's the expectation of behavior today. Okay, whoever would like to speak first can go up to Madam Clerk and provide their. That's, you know what, you win, you win.
Are we allowed to have 2 speakers at a time?
Yeah, yeah.
Apologies, it's still in
6 minutes.
No, it's okay. So then you'll state your name and your address, and then your time will start.
Absolutely. My name is Jordan Nelkin. My address is W280N3592 Taylor's Woods Road, town of Delafield, Wisconsin. I am here with my sister, Katrina Nelkin, and we are Ronald Nelkin's daughter, who owns this property, and this is our father's estate. We are speaking on behalf of the executor of the estate, Mary Caddy, who unfortunately could not be here due to a health reason. We purchased our 10-acre property in 2014 from Gilbert Bosey, specifically for its A2 zoning and neighbor spacing. These protections were established in 1990. Since then, nothing has changed in this area except for a new owner wanting a different zoning for, for personal gain. The AW protections have already been compromised with the complete disregard for the protected wetlands, shoreline, and primary corridor. If a partial rezoning of this lot be rezoned to an R3, it would infringe on our neighbor spacing and privacy, which was paramount in our decision to purchase our property. I would like to know why one parcel with its wants and desires has more precedence over ours. Sorry, he has something to say as well.
We're good, we're good.
You're paused, so.
I would like to know why one parcel with its wants and desires has more precedence over ours. Are you going to compensate us for relinquishing the safety guidelines with which we purchased our property? We believe it is reprehensible, disrespectful, and deceitful of the town to change this zoning for the personal gain of one parcel. Do the needs of one outweigh the needs of others? Additionally, the damage already done under the current zoning, is that going to be restored? At the very least, fines should be levied. Thank you, and apologies.
Oh, you're fine.
No apologies
And we
needed.
did email this as well, but if you would like a copy, I can give
Thank
it
you.
to you as well.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you, apologies everyone.
All right, next.
My name is Charles Durkee, W280N 3563 Taylor's Woods Road. My wife Sonia and I own the property immediately to the south of CSM 3775. And thank you for allowing us to give our thoughts and presentation. This lot was, and always will be constrained. The constraints are not imposed. The constraints were there and known at the time of the purchase. In effect, the requested R3 designation functions as a workaround, changing the rules and shifting the impact of those constraints onto the properties by allowing smaller setbacks. There's already an existing home that's currently being lived in on the property. There are environmental issues which certainly have been addressed. And yes, there was invasive vegetation. At the same time, it functioned as a wildlife sanctuary. The Bibblers maintained it in an ecologically sensitive way, and now we are facing a potentially larger structure on a site where much of the vegetative buffer is already removed and the wildlife is already visibly diminished. This proposal will directly affect the Nelkins and us, compromising our privacy and potentially reducing our property values. Further, it will change the character of the broader north end of Taylor's Woods Road. The current and proposed site disturbances will continue to degrade the experience of many paddlers and boaters who use Taylor's Bay as a wildlife sanctuary. I have been asked many times, how did this happen? At a minimum, I believe the town should understand the site plans before approving a zoning change. Even if approved with conditions, granting a large building pad on this constrained site will further reduce buffering and further increase the impacts on the adjacent properties and the bay. Finally, at a personal level, given the history of environmental and property line violations and of confrontation between various neighbors and the new owner, reducing the buffer between our houses raises legitimate concerns for us. We simply want to use and enjoy our property with a reasonable sense of privacy and security. I respectfully request that you deny this zoning proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next. Does anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing? Okay, thank you. Ms. Lato, do you have a report that you'd like to give in this portion, or would you prefer to do it in the Plan Commission? I can do it during the Plan Commission meeting. Okay. All right, and so I believe there is no one else who wishes to speak. Does Waukesha County have anything to add? I actually do. Yeah, microphone, please. You're fine.
I just wanted to mention that I did reach out to the fire department. I have yet to receive comment back regarding the access issues. I did also ask for the fire department and the petitioner to provide a site plan showing where they would propose to park any equipment, construction materials, things of that nature, at the time of their proposed home construction. So, and then I guess one thing I thought of, may want to think of a balance between the existing home being 30 feet away from a wetland and any new home being farther away from the wetland if the environmental features are of utmost importance. That would just be something to take into consideration. If they were to replace the home in kind, it would have potentially more of an impact to the wetland, and if it were to be rezoned and they were to move away from the wetland, like I had said, we would require some sort of restoration plan. So I just want to make that clear that this isn't like a free-for-all,
So the home currently is how many feet away from the wetland?
It's approximately 32 feet away from the wetland.
And then if there was a new home, the requirement would be 75 feet?
It would.
And with respect to, could that home be built there today?
This home?
Correct.
It would need a variance. Alternatively, it could be replaced in kind. So they could choose to tear it down and rebuild it exactly as it exists.
Like the same three-dimensional envelope?
Yep.
Yeah. That would be 30 feet from the wetland?
Yes.
And Ms. Lato, can you advise if there's a new house that's built, what's the process for how that would be approved?
A zoning permit is just an administrative approval through Waukesha County's Planning and Zoning Division, looking at the zoning ordinance, unless they need a variance. In that case, it goes to the Waukesha County Board of Adjustment, where that's a public hearing as well. So neighbors are notified within 300 feet of the property boundary that there's something that needs to go before the Board of Adjustment. But if it's a proposal that complies with all aspects of the zoning code, it's just an administrative process through the county. No one's notified.
And that's not a today issue whatsoever.
Correct, that's not a today issue.
If this is rezoned to an R3 and they have the 14-foot minimum setback or offsets, versus if it stays A2, couldn't they get a variance for potentially less of an offset than the 14 feet? So, okay.
And there was just an affirmative yes.
Yeah, I mean, they could seek a variance even after a rezone. They could seek a variance for all of the above. We just thought it would maybe look better if they were to seek a variance in the future, that they had already exhausted all of their steps to achieve the best possible building envelope that they could have with all the restrictions. So we just thought this would help them, and if they maintain that, then it would be conforming with offset, and they may still need another one for wetland. I'm not sure what their final plans are, but they could seek a variance for either, with either zoning.
How much teeth and enforcement action does the county have to ensure that these plantings get replaced and remediated from the vegetation that was removed? And then if the wetland is, needs to be remediated and fixed, I mean, does the county have the staff and the enforcement to ensure that the follow-through happens?
Yeah, so actually, we implemented a inspection tracking database where we have now put in anything that needs an inspection through our office. We have now documented, and we have our deadlines set in there, and we get automatic emails. So any vegetation or restoration work that needs to be replaced or replanted, we will make sure that they hopefully comply with the deadline, and then maintain our inspections every 3, and 5 years. We also have a conservation biologist on staff. We work closely with Sewer PAC. We often have them review our vegetation plans, and seek guidance from them as well for if plants were appropriate. I admit that maybe our initial vegetation removal permit maybe wasn't reviewed as thoroughly as it should have been. But I think moving forward, we now know where that may have gone wrong, and we propose to do better for the environment.
I'll also just add that it's not uncommon for the county to require for large restoration projects some sort of financial assurance that is kept to make sure that that property actually implements and that it stays alive, that the vegetation remains as it is, it's supposed to be, and that deed restriction says if it dies, they're responsible for replanting it. There's another deadline that's implemented, and that financial assurance is not released until a certain amount of time has gone by to make sure that that buffer has actually survived.
And so am I correct that from what your presentation was that the vegetation that was removed was with the county's approval?
It was.
And then some of the vegetation didn't, that the replanted, and then the vegetation that was required was replanted?
It was. I went out in February. It was not the growing season, so I did notice that the vegetation had been replaced. It's protocol for staff to conduct site inspections for rezones and other requests that require more than administrative approval. So our manager and myself went out on site to conduct that site inspection and decided to check on the vegetation while we were out there. And that's when we noticed that it wasn't thriving as we had hoped.
And so some of the replanted vegetation didn't take? I mean, or didn't thrive or survive or whatever you want to
due
call
to
it?
deer browsing and moist conditions, I think, mostly.
Just to be clear, the vegetation that was removed and replaced was not in the wetland. It was outside the wetland.
It was outside the wetland. If you want to pull up my exhibit again with the documents.
So that
Or the
this
dots
has
on it.
nothing to do with wetland restoration.
It does not. Like, this is, like I had started out with, this is really just for a rezone. I just wanted to call attention to concerns of the community and kind of put that right, I guess, and just explain things a little better, but I'm not saying their concerns are not valid. So you can see that the wetland was delineated in 2023.
It's this black.
Yeah.
The black line and then the little
So
plants?
some of those, it does border the wetland.
It borders it, but the wetland does not go all the way down according to the delineation. When we were on site, we did notice some wetland species popping up through the turf, so that might be something to discuss with the owners in the future regarding additional wetland vegetation near the southeast shore.
And then the orange was what was removed?
The orange was invasive shrub species, and the yellow were trees. Dead, non-native trees.
And so the orange were the honeysuckle and the buckthorn?
Yep.
And then the yellow that were removed were the dead cherry, the box elder,
Correct.
and the dead ash?
And the poplar, yep.
And the poplar, okay.
And so you used the delineation to verify that when you were on site? And you mentioned in February you were there, you used that delineation to verify that only items were removed from outside of that scope?
So I use this site plan. This was the approved site plan with the zoning permit in 2023. So I had this site plan out with me.
Okay.
All the replacement vegetation are the boxes. So, do you see the boxes?
You
over
had mentioned the homeowner had a new delineation done. I didn't know if that's what you were working against.
No, the vegetation didn't really have anything to do with the wetland delineation
Okay.
at that time. I just wanted to make it known that he had a delineation done and that, so now we have setbacks and we know that work wasn't being done in a wetland, things like that.
Fair enough.
Also, just vegetation removal, correct me if I'm wrong, Cassie, but it is allowed with a permit in the wetland. So just because it's a wetland doesn't mean that you're not allowed to remove vegetation. You need to do it with a permit, and there's certain parameters that go with that.
And
But,
environmental corridor.
yes.
And then those little square boxes,
Those are the
the
replacement
replacements.
vegetation.
So that, and then along the line, okay. The question, and just typically we don't take questions from the audience, but the question was, does the environmental corridor protection protect anything?
So it does. When there is a property that is largely environmental corridor, or partially environmental corridor and any structures are proposed, there's a certain amount of disturbance that's permitted in the environmental corridor. Additionally, there is a provision in the ordinance that says, that kind of calls out specific allowances for vegetation removal, invasive species, dead, diseased, if it's a safety hazard, things like that are permitted. If it's within 35 feet and also within the environmental corridor, it needs to be replaced. So, yes, I would say most of the protections for environmental corridor have to do with mass disturbance and clear cutting for properties that are proposing a new home, and, they're permitted a maximum amount of like a disturbance envelope. So they can't just disturb the entire property if it's all EC.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay. Anything else you would say?
I think that's it.
Okay, no, thank you.
Thanks.
And any other public comment in response to Waukesha County, limited to the 3 minutes again? Ma'am, you can approach the microphone. You can give it your white piece of paper. Please do. Oh, there's one up here, ma'am. Ma'am? Is it okay? Can she give it to you after? Yeah, just state your name and your address and then fill it out and provide it to her after.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Sonia Durkee, wife of Charles Durkee, and we live next door to the subject property.
State your address, please.
I'm sorry.
Your address, please. Oh.
W280 and 3563 Taylor's Woods Road, Northeast. I just wanted to point out that the map that Cassie is showing for the Taylor's Woods Road, it's actually not a public road. It ends at the gray. And what goes beyond there is how the four of us parcels access our property. It's narrow, and we have had emergencies, and it's sobering. It really is. I also want to point out that the Nelkins own not just
Ma'am, unfortunately, because of the Zoom land, people are watching, they can't hear you when you approach, so.
I just want to say that the Nelkins own two parcels. If this were Right, they own the one to the left of the subject parcel and the one above it. So together, with the Nelkins, we own 80% of the perimeter of the subject property. And we are opposed to the proposed rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And then if you can fill out the form and just provide it to the clerk, that would be helpful. Any other public comment? Okay, and then, so with that, the public hearing is closed at 7:10, and we are calling the Plan Commission meeting to order. I would ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the March 3rd, 2026 meeting. Any discussion or comments from the Plan Commission?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With respect to item number 3, communications for discussion and possible action, it states none. Is there anything additional? None, okay. Old business, none. New business. And with respect to the new business,
I'd like to make a motion that we take item B out of order, the fence for the cranes.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. So the first item on the agenda will be the discussion and possible action on a request to construct a new fence located between the road right-of-way and the nearest portion of the principal structure at W283 N3320 Lakeside Road, Mary and Martin Crane owners. Are the owners here to speak? Okay, please come to the microphone, sir.
Is it okay to give an overview?
Yeah, and actually,
Okay.
we're going to give a quick overview from Ms. Lato, and then you can add, sir, as you deem appropriate.
Okay, so the subject property here is on Lakeside Road, and the property owners do own on both sides of the road, so they own this piece of land as well, and that is the area that we're talking about up here. So on the GIS, it's a little bit hard to see because of the property boundary here, but this is an existing fence. In your package, you can see what it looks like there. I put a picture right in the staff report. So they are proposing to replace that fence as it's starting to fall apart. And they are proposing to replace it with a 4-foot tall fence that would still span the entire width of the property here, so about 149 feet along the road. It's a dog-ear style white cedar fence. I did have Don go out there and take a look at it and make sure that he didn't have an issue with its location, given that it's pretty much like right on the right-of-way line, and he did not. So he thought that it was fine. And given that it's 4 feet tall and it's technically in between the house and the road, on the road side along that, and felt it was appropriate, given the different style fence, to come before Plan Commission. So with that, I do recommend approval of that request to replace the fence as presented.
Sir, do you have any additional comments that you'd like to add?
I really don't, unless there are questions I can answer.
So
And are
what's-
there any questions for the homeowner?
I don't know if it's for you, for the homeowner. What do you mean the right-of-way line? If there's an easement, or there's the road line. I see the orange line up there. Is that where's the,
Actually, that's part of the plat. So this is his property line here.
okay?
And Lakeside Road's a little bit complicated, but in this case, it is being shown correctly. They've had a certified survey map done. This is the right-of-way at this point.
So I may not be using it, but if we were going to build a new road and make it the maximum size we had the right to, those are the lines you're talking about.
That's a right-of-way, yes. In this case, it's been reduced to this width, so you wouldn't be able to extend it. But yes, there are other town roads where it's platted smaller, but the road's bigger. But
Yes, that's what I was asking.
Yes,
about. So
yeah.
the fence is outside of the right-of-way.
Correct, yes.
Okay. I could have asked you that, I suppose.
Wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think you asked, but yeah, she knows.
Okay.
Right, any other questions for the homeowner, Ms. Lato?
I make a motion that we approve the request, seeing that the fence is proposed to replace the fence and that the highway superintendent has signed off and it's outside the right-of-way.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And then thank you, sir. And then the item 5A, new business, consideration and recommendation to Waukesha County on a request to amend the district zoning map from the A2 Rural Home District to the R3 Residential District on the upland areas of a property located at W280 N3595 Taylor Woods Road. John and Jamie Jewell, owners. Ms. Lado?
Okay, so Cassie already did a really great job of going through the county zoning ordinance, so I will try not to really belabor the report part of it. But I did, her measuring tools are just a little bit better than mine. I think you said that you had .79 acres was upland, right? The rezone map, okay. So more concrete measuring than mine. I had gotten about .75 acres of upland area to be rezoned. As she's pointed out, the property does have significant environmental challenges, as everyone has acknowledged and aware. I didn't turn the topography on before, but that's the slope on this property as well. So really, if this property had never been developed before, the directive would be from planning staff that this is where you should build. You should build as close to the road as you can to avoid significant impacts to slopes. So I do feel it's an appropriate direction for the county to advise the property owner to seek this rezone to help actually preserve some of the land here on this subject parcel, understanding that there's larger issues at bay as well. I also had a table, but I will defer to Cassie's table as well, which I believe you all have a copy in front of you too. And I'll pull it up here on the screen for Zoom and the audience. I think that was here. I had not really, when I was doing this report, I was not considering the fact that this is technically a lot not abutting a public road. I'm not sure I really knew that until a little bit later down the line, but a lot not abutting a public road does have larger lot line or lot size requirements and width requirements. It has a 3-acre minimum and 200 feet in average width, which is the same as the A2 zoning. So the intensity here really does not change between the uses. In the shoreline code, the permitted uses in the R3 mirror the same ones that are in the A2. So that is inclusive of single-family residential homes, which is what this is intended to be. It would not be able to be further divided because it would not be able to meet that 3-acre lot size. So it is how it is with a single-family home on it. So this table, which again is in here and it can be submitted into the record, is just a more accurate depiction than mine when I was just kind of considering the R3 on its own without the lot net abutting provisions that place a higher standard in the county ordinance. As we have seen, the zoning around it is A2 rural home on the northwest, on the south, the north and the northeast, and the south is the lakefront that is R3, and then there's HG high groundwater, which is all the conservancy land. And again, not to just kind of belabor the point, but this is entirely within the county shoreline zoning, and these areas, let me turn this off. All of these environmental lands here, this light green color is the HG high groundwater. That's typically areas that have hydric soils or hydric inclusion, so where it's wet, which makes sense when there's wetland. The wetland hatching, which does not necessarily mirror a delineation. This is generalized mapping. That's why people are required to get delineations to actually find the true and proper boundary of things like environmental corridor, wetland, and floodplain when they're choosing to do something on their property. And then this little purple hatching down here is the floodplain. So it does encroach into the property a little bit along the shoreline, which is pretty typical for Pewaukee Lake properties as well. And as far as the land use plan goes, Cassie already brought that up as well, but it is designated as low density residential, both on the town of Delafield land use plan and on Waukesha County's comprehensive development plan. The density requirement is the same throughout this whole neighborhood. It's the 20,000 square feet minimum per dwelling unit. That is not proposed to change. So the request to go to R3 from A2 is consistent with the land use plan. The primary environmental corridor designation is not proposed to change. So that is, again, consistent with the land use plan. All of those environmentally sensitive areas remain under the land use plan designation of primary environmental corridor. And the last thing that I'll just note is that the site development on its own is a separate process. That is not a legislative process like a rezone. That is a separate process that is either administrative or quasi-judicial through the Waukesha County Board of Adjustment if the owners choose to seek that. So I think those do need to be separated out a little bit of why we are here tonight and what the specific request is. But other than that, I don't have anything to add. And my recommendation would be to make a positive recommendation to Waukesha County for the rezone request.
And then with respect to the owner of the parcel, Mr. or Mrs. Jewell, are they here? And then, would you like to speak at all? Okay. And so, with respect to the Plan Commission, does the Plan Commission have questions for either Ms. Lato or for the property owner?
I think they both, the county and Ms. Lato, have done a great job of laying out the situation and explaining everything and explaining the chronology and explaining the vegetation removal and a lot of the concerns that were brought up in the emails and phone calls that I've received regarding this this issue. I mean, it's obviously an emotional issue when these kind of things come up, you know, when change in the neighborhood. So, great job, and I appreciate everything that was said thus far.
So we already had the public hearing, the open public hearing, and
Yes.
and so that part of it's closed as far, okay. So with respect to the, I just want to make sure I'm understanding with the legal issues related to the rezoning and what our requirements are, or our, restrictions are as a plan commission with respect to the rezoning piece of it.
Because what I hear from you, Ms. Lato, and what I heard from Cassie was that based on everything that's been presented and in the application, they meet everything to get the rezone, to change it from A2 to R3.
That's correct. They do. Rezones do not need to be sought or approved only if they benefit a community. That's not a requirement, and that we saw that a lot in a lot of the public comment that was submitted. Site plans are not required with a rezone request. For larger developments, it's nice and usually encouraged. Sometimes plan commissions require it at that time if they want to move forward because they want to see what it's being rezoned to. In this case, you can do that if you would like, if you want to see what is actually going to go here, but it's a single-family home for a single-family home, and the setbacks that are required through the shoreline ordinance are so restrictive that the maximum building envelope will never be attained. I mean, the 75-foot setback requirement significantly limits where they can put this building and how it can be, and which is where it can be constructed. As Cassie pointed out, the county does really do care about environmental lands and have a history of putting environmental restrictions on private property that some I have heard through residents that can be a burden on their properties, but it really is for the betterment of the lake and the lake quality. There is evidence that shows that in the data as well. That's nationwide. So tonight, the request to rezone, what staff looks at when these come through is it a single spot zone? So is there anything else around it that can be tied to? In this case, there is a string of R3 residential properties adjacent to it that are also right on the lake. Yes, there are also A2 properties right next to it as well, but that's how zoning is. Zoning is clustering of properties generally. A spot zone is when you have one single property that doesn't have any other consistent zoning around it. So they meet that requirement. The zoning category that they're going to is not a down zone, which is illegal. This is an up zoning, and it does allow them a little bit more flexibility with respect to the offset. So they meet that requirement as well. Down zoning is not permitted. And then they comply with the land use plan. They're only proposing to rezone the upland portion of that buildable lot. And the land use plan is relative to density. The environmental features are not changing. So if they were proposing to rezone the entire parcel from the HG high groundwater, the environmental corridor, the C1 overlay, all to R3 residential, then they would not comply with the land use plan and we'd be having a different conversation. But that's not the request in front of us. So does that answer your question?
It does. And with the, so if they're going to be able to build potentially something, whether it's on the existing parcel, the existing footprint, they could tear down and build there,
Yes.
potentially.
Yes. So how shoreline zoning laws work, and Cassie, please correct me if I'm misremembering this, but when you have a non-conforming house, which this is, there are different, depending on how non-conforming your house is, there's different tiers of what you can do to that house. But everyone take note, the grandfathering provision that everyone seems to think applies that is not the case. You are not grandfathered in because you have a house. You can build another house on that same foundation and it can be twice as tall. That's not a thing. That's not how shoreline zoning works. Maybe at one point it was, but not anymore. So today what the rules are is that when you rebuild a non-conforming house, depending on the severity, you're limited to the 3-dimensional envelope. State law says you get to build what you had. You don't get the same footprint and get to build a bigger house going up. You get to build exactly what you had. So I've only ever seen one person do that, and they did. They rebuilt the exact same house that was there. Most people don't want to do that, right? You're tearing down the house because you want to build your brand new dream home. So that is one option of theirs, is to rebuild the exact same house. The other one is to seek a variance to get some relief. Variances are meant to allow for the minimum amount of relief necessary. In this case, the building envelope is pretty uniquely shaped. It would be probably pretty challenging to design and construct a home of a shape like that. So it does make sense, in my opinion. I'm not a part of that staff that would talk about this with them, but it makes sense to apply for a wetland setback variance with the caveat that if you're getting closer to the wetland than what the zoning provisions allow, you need to do a zoning or a wetland mitigation buffer, which it sounds like the county is already talking to the owners about. And then the third option is to design the most unique house that you'll see on Pewaukee Lake, conform to the zoning ordinance, and the planners will approve it within 7 to 10 business days, usually.
And that's the red shape you're talking about.
That's the red shape, yeah.
Well, and then there's actually the other red shape.
Yeah, so,
under-
yes,
that
excuse me.
the-
So this is if the rezone were to move forward. Without it, this is the conforming envelope. It's 612 square feet. The county code requires a minimum floor area of 1,100 square feet. That is to ensure that when there are challenging properties, there is at least a minimum home size that someone is guaranteed of 1,100 square feet. So that is another option that they could potentially work around. So, and that wouldn't necessarily require a variance if they were limited to that. Is that correct? No.
I think, if they can't achieve it.
Oh, yeah.
Building envelope.
Administratively flex some of the zoning provisions because when the county shoreline zoning code was updated in 2016, provisions were put in to allow staff some flexibility to help people in situations like this, where the zoning provisions are so restrictive that you are not guaranteed an envelope that actually would allow you to rebuild a house. One of those is the 1,100 square feet provision, and the other one, what Cassie's talking about, is that you are allowed a minimum of 30 feet of depth. So, and that's generally for really shallow lots, right? If your shore setback and your road setback are so restrictive that they overlap, well, you can't build a house there, can you? So you get at least 30 feet of depth, and instead of having to go to a variance and try to prove that you have a hardship on the property, staff can flex the road setback, not the shore, the road setback to allow you a 30-foot deep envelope, which sometimes also ends up in a little bit of an awkward shape.
But what I'm hearing from you, if I'm stating this correctly, is there's no option that doesn't involve construction. They're going to be able to
Correct.
construct something.
Yes, that is true. Absolutely.
It's just a question of what it is.
Yes.
And the ultimate decision maker on this is going to be the county. and the county
Correct.
board.
Yes,
We're just providing a recommendation.
Yes.
Because our hands are tied because of the shoreline ordinance that took place in 2016, when the county took over the shoreline, right?
yes.
Any other questions from the Plan Commission?
Does the square footage, on the previous drawing?
Yep.
Does the square footage, that encompasses building, outbuilding, garage, anything that's,
Any structure,
any structure?
except for the potential for a boathouse, but that's a different story, but yes. This or a patio, yeah.
That would be 7 feet.
But the shore setback, wetland setback would remain the same.
For a patio.
Yeah.
Right, any further discussion?
I'm going to make a motion that we provide a positive recommendation to Waukesha County to approve the request to rezone the A2 Rural Home District to an R3 Residential District at W280 and 3595 Taylor's Woods Road. But as it progresses, I want the county to note, and I want Lupe to note, and I want the county board to note that they need to stay on top of the vegetation remediation. They need to be cognizant of the neighbors' concerns. There needs to be a plan for staging of the construction for emergency access, because it's a problem on all these lake roads. Construction and change, it's inconvenient, and it's a problem. So they need to be neighborly and ensure that emergency access is maintained. And then I've also heard concerns about some of the lighting in the sensitive environmental corridor and wildlife. I hear there's 2 huge floodlights. I'd like those to be addressed and to ensure that future lighting and future development on this property conforms with lighting that is not intrusive to the neighborhood and the community.
Are those recommended conditions of the rezone? Okay.
Conditions, please.
Any second, any
I'll
comments?
second that motion.
Anyone have questions after that, or all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries with the conditions. And then the next item on the agenda is 5C, consideration and recommendation to Waukesha County on a request to consider the retention of a greenhouse structure on a trailer under the undesirable structure provisions of the Waukesha County Shoreline Protection Ordinance located at W292 and 2104 Elmhurst Drive, West Scholar owner. Ms. Lato?
Sorry, just give me 1 second.
Very strict.
I'm going to turn the zoning off.
Thank you.
Okay, so the subject property is located here off of Elmhurst Drive. And Waukesha County has received a zoning permit to retain a greenhouse. You have pictures of the greenhouse in your packet. They're like Walgreens pictures. You don't have any?
Here, I can. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hold on here. That is not. Oh, I have them pulled up already.
Never mind.
Thank you.
I did just scan them, and I if you don't mind, I just do want to pull them up quickly, but, oops, that's not what I want to do. How do I unshare my screen? Don't really want to open my email on there. There we go. Oh, that didn't do a very good job. Shoot. Well, I didn't check the scan just now when I did it before the meeting, and it's not very good. All it does is really show you the inside, so maybe we could pass the pictures around if not everyone
I
has
think
them.
Photos down
everyone's-
here, so we're,
You have
we
plenty?
we
got
have
plenty of
copies in the
photos.
packet.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. So this is a 2024 aerial. I'm going to show a couple other pictures too as we go along, but I'll go down to just the request initially. So the zoning permit was submitted to the county to obtain after-the-fact approval of a greenhouse. It's 8 feet long by 28 feet long. It's a mobile greenhouse, so it is on wheels. So the owner implicated so that it could be moved around in the spring, but right now it's too soft to move. That was part of the application, and contains, as you can see in the one picture that scanned appropriately, the dirt and pots and things like that within this greenhouse. It has been noted by the county that it appears this greenhouse was previously used for commercial use. The owner did indicate in his application that he was using it for personal use at this point. And he would like to place it near the garage, which would be in a conforming location. Waukesha County does have a provision in their ordinance that's an unorthodox structure provision that essentially states that anything that is not typical, which would mean an accessory building on wheels, requires town plan commission approval. So because this is on wheels, they kicked it back to the town to evaluate and discuss of whether or not it's appropriate to have a trailer or a greenhouse on wheels on a smaller residential property in a pretty dense area as well. So I will note that the county has received numerous complaints about this property, and the town has also received numerous complaints about this property, in particular over the last couple months, about the storage of commercial vehicles and junk being stored outdoors, and a farm wagon. I believe there was a forklift. The county has been working to address them. I did talk to the planning manager today, Jason Fruth, about that, kind of just getting an update about where they're maybe at. And he was very aware of the situation and had been talking with his staff and noted that they need to ramp up and they are ready to aggressively pursue a lot of the commercial vehicles that are being stored on this property. As part of that, and I did also receive and was asked to also share some of what we're talking about here as well over the course of time. So here's a picture of the greenhouse here. All these other items on site will need to go. So the unorthodox structure, part of the provision does read about, is it conducive to the neighborhood? Is it going to cause is it against the general desirability of the neighborhood, and could it adversely affect neighbors? So with the amount of equipment that is currently being stored, I can just go to a more recent picture. These are all in April. And this was just earlier this week, just from the road right of way. I do question whether it is appropriate to have, for me to recommend in good faith approval of such a structure right now until this property can get cleaned up and back into compliance with county zoning ordinances. The amount of commercial vehicles on the property is concerning to me. The greenhouse structure itself, when you look at the pictures, it doesn't look that it's like falling apart. It looks to be in pretty good condition, I thought. So my recommendation in the staff report, I said it's really up to your discretion. So it's something to discuss and kind of looking at these pictures. But I do feel it might be appropriate to recommend that either this be denied until and unless the property get cleaned up, and then you can come back and request it again, or just tabled to a date certain to then discuss it then if you feel that the structure is in decent condition. My concerns are still, the possibility with something being on wheels, it does elevate the chance for something to become more commercial in nature. If it can be, you can grow what you need to in there, wheel it off site, sell things as a farm stand, which is not in compliance with zoning, at least in the town of Delafield, nor is it allowed in the county ordinance to conduct a business even off-site from your property. So you can't store materials for a business on your residential property that you are doing elsewhere on site. So for those reasons, I would recommend denial of this particular request at this time for the fact that it is on wheels. It's unorthodox to have an accessory building on wheels. It also could allow for no building permits to be pulled for that. I'm not 100% sure on that. I get kind of different answers from building inspectors based on if it's on wheels, whether or not they need to get a building permit because it's movable, it's temporary. Yes. So, so that's kind of another question about it, but these are some pictures as well.
Wasn't reported to us under the shoreline protection ordinance, just somewhere else in the city about it, or is it, is there an undesirable structure provision?
Actually, there
general?
is. Actually, there is in the town.
In the town, Chris.
Yes.
You
in the
don't
town.
need city-
Not
you don't need
city.
city anymore.
I always say, I said town when I was in the city, so I just go back and forth.
The town actually does have something that is similar to this provision, so.
Okay.
So I think if it was just the greenhouse, that would be a different discussion. Yeah, what really concerns me is the fact that the request for a site visit was denied. So that shows that they're not cooperative, first of all. And then the amount of stuff that is sitting there is a concern. So I think we should just deny the request as recommended by our planner. And till the property gets cleaned up and the county enforces and gets the property cleaned up. I think it's pretty straightforward.
I would like to give Mr. Gala just a chance to be,
Sure.
to make a statement. Are you
I
here,
didn't know
Mr.?
he was here.
Are you here, Mr. Gala? No, he's not here. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't think he was here.
Okay, I don't know what he looks like, so, and so with, and I guess I'm concerned too, it says conducive to the neighborhood and desirability to the neighborhood. I mean, those are two things, even, like, let's just pretend there's no junk. And there's no stuff, excuse me. There's no stuff. There's not a lot of stuff. And there's just the greenhouse. I still don't think that greenhouse, no matter where it is around that structure, is conducive to the neighborhood across from the lake and that it's desirable to the neighborhood. Like if that's what we need to approve, if this is considered to be an unorthodox structure, I don't see it as conducive to the neighborhood. And that's, when you were reading that's kind of the statutory requirements, that's how I look at it, without even, taking out any of the other issues with respect to items outside of the home. And I also have if there's a lot of commercial equipment and then there is a significantly sized greenhouse, the math for me isn't working on what that may be. And if there's businesses are prohibited in the area, that's also a concern. So that's just my thoughts on it. And I would, agree with Commissioner Kranick about just the denial seems like the appropriate step at this point.
I agree. Someone put up a small greenhouse in their yard? Can someone put a greenhouse in their yard?
Yes.
I mean, they didn't need a permit for it.
You would?
You should. It's still a structure.
If you're building structures, yeah.
I go to Home Depot and
You'll get into the temporary structure versus permanent structure.
I was gonna build up to tiny houses on wheels in a minute.
Yeah.
Well, the fact, yeah. So the fact that this is on wheels does that make it a, what's the word?
Unorthodox structure.
Orthodox
Yes.
is being on wheels versus being just a stationary greenhouse?
Yes. So he could,
It's not about the size or the condition.
Correct.
Or, you know, it looks like it's kind of a, you know, it doesn't look like some shop manufactured greenhouse. It looks like something that was, you know, put together.
What makes it
So,
a
yeah.
structure? If it had beds in it and it was a camper, would it not be a structure?
that gets into a whole different world of
Looking at
zoning
it, I'm wondering Why that
provisions.
isn't a trailer?
Why it's on a trailer?
Why it's not a trailer? Why is it considered a structure?
It is a trailer.
So, but why is it considered then a structure?
A structure is anything that has form or use. I don't know if you want to read that from your code, but the definition of a structure is very specific.
This is towable.
Well, that's what I mean about the building inspector
But it's
comment.
not being towed. It's,
Well,
you know,
no, but
that's,
he
yeah.
is stating it's being towed. He exactly
This is
states
the-
it will be towed, but it can't be towed now because the ground is soft.
Honestly, I don't even think I'd like to see this come back if it's still on wheels.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think, you know, the whole unorthodox structure.
Unless he wants to give an
argument
explanation
applies.
of the purpose of it being on wheels.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think you need to clean up the property and, you know, create this into something that's not a trailer.
If it's gonna stay, right, yeah.
And I'm not sure why he's not here. I haven't admittedly talked to him in quite some time, so it might be that he did not remember that it was on the agenda, which is actually a concern that I have. I'm not sure, but
There's notice that's online. I
Yeah.
mean, everyone has notice of public
Yep.
hearings and, of the public
the
hearing and
agenda,
also the
yeah.
plan commission agenda. And
Okay.
he submitted a permit.
What's the process to contact him for an inspection that he denied?
so when he applied, I said, I'll probably need to do a site inspection. And he said, no, I'm going to bring you pictures instead. And he did the next day, or maybe even later that day. I think I was already gone. I largely suspect that the reason was twofold. One, because the county was already dealing with him pretty strong at that point, and he just didn't want another government authority on his property. And I do believe the other matter is my professional chargeback form of not having to accrue time for me to go out there as well. I think that was a factor.
So 4 photos is what he provided.
Yes, of the greenhouse specifically. Yeah.
Any further discussion or questions? This is not a public hearing, ma'am. So you're attending the plan commission meeting, so you can listen, but yeah, it's not a speaking forum.
We've heard and are aware of your concerns, so we appreciate everything that
Yeah, we've read
and everybody being
emails.
here tonight, so.
Yeah, we've read emails, we notice all the neighbors here, and so, at the public, this isn't the public hearing component of it.
It's up to you. You are.
You know what? I will give you your 3 minutes to speak. Please start. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Peter Barassi. I live at West 291 North 2152 Elmhurst Drive. And if you put that picture up you just brought, okay, at the very bottom of the screen is my wife's flower garden, and that's most of the things that you see here and we see from our kitchen window. This is as clean as it's ever been. Now, we have a little greenhouse, 8 foot long, 6 foot wide, 6 foot high. We've had it for 25 years. I replaced the stuff on it. You can barely see it. This thing is 8 foot wide and 28 feet long. The wagon you see between that greenhouse and the garage was a vegetable wagon. Both of those were built by Mr. Gala last year. He intended to raise plants and trees and sell them out of a vegetable wagon, which he pulled out to Thomas Road. And someone warned him he can't be there. He didn't have any license or anything on there. Now, that pickup truck sitting there has not been licensed since 2015. Those 2 enclosed trailers, probably legal. They're filled with junk. There's a 3-car garage. Right now, if you'll bring up one of the nasty pictures that you saw with all that equipment, you saw the forklift. The forklift was in the garage temporarily. It's now sitting out again. Yeah, that forklift, commercial type forklift. The extreme left of that picture is a dumper that fits on the forks of the forklift. And if you had our view to the left, there is a heavy equipment trailer, a tandem axle trailer that you would put a cat or a small to medium-sized excavator on. Hasn't moved since last year. It's been one thing, and he's been piling on and piling on and piling on. Do I sound frustrated? Yes. Again, in the middle of the left picture, you'll see a round circular white, I think he's been mixing fertilizer in it. Otherwise, he's got an illegal still or something, I don't know. I'm overdoing this here, but this is the frustration that this neighborhood has been living with, and really to the, destruction or potential destruction of property values in the neighborhood. We're under shoreline zoning here. On top of the enclosed trailer closest to the garage, that's a blue plastic pallet. To the left of that garage, set farther back, he has a burning pile that's 10 or 12 feet in diameter, far beyond the 4 foot that the town allows. It's going to be a problem. I know in my heart we're going to be talking about this next year. No matter how hard you get on them, I'm afraid that we're going to be talking about this next year. But certainly I would say give them a flat no, show me some progress, and continue to show me progress. I don't expect it. Thank you.
Chairman Janusiak, if I asked Cassie to stick around because I know that she had a conversation with Manager Jason Fruth from Planning and Zoning about what the county is doing, what their plan is for going after this violation. I don't know if you would like to hear any of that to help with the neighbors or not while they're here.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
I think that would be good for.
Cassie,
community, so please do.
not to put you on the spot, but do you mind? Yeah, thank you.
So I am not assigned this violation. I'm not familiar with the specifics of it. But I do know that it has been a contentious issue. I know that neighbors have been really concerned about it, and we are definitely, our staff is empathetic with it, especially Jason and Evan, who's assigned the violation. Basically, I guess Jason feels strongly that it should be denied, that the unorthodox structure should be denied. There are several violations on this property that deadlines for most have passed to either remove the structures or maybe apply for permits or something like that. There are some deadlines coming up tomorrow. Staff is actively working with the owner on this. Apparently, he did have a family emergency and was out of the state for some time. And because of that, I believe we are willing to provide a short window of maybe another little deadline, maybe a week or so. But before we begin aggressively pursuing remediation, most likely in forms of citations or other legal means. So we are planning on pursuing it in a more direct and strong-fisted manner. But again, and we apologize and we acknowledge how long that this can take. We go out, we inspect, we discuss as staff, we write letters, we provide deadlines, we provide extensions. So, I mean, it's not, we can't just come down hard. We need to prove in front of a judge that we have been reasonable and given the owner a chance to comply. And we just want you to know that we're acknowledging it, and
Like you've been documenting it, and you've been trying to work with the owner, and now we're to a point where the county just needs to get really aggressive and try to get this cleaned up for the sake of the community and the neighbors.
correct. And I think because of that, that is the reason that we are strongly recommending denial for the unorthodox structure. So that's really all I have to say.
So beyond the county, is the DNR aware of this property? You know, what I see, sites similar to this, the potential for groundwater contamination, runoff. You look at a picture like that, and I see that wet area in the middle of the driveway on a dry day. What is it? Is that, a leaky tank? Is that something that was spilled? Yeah, I mean, if you're storing construction equipment and you have things that haven't moved in 10 years, the chances for contamination, I think, are increased. And given the proximity, you're across the street from the lake, I think that should be a concern.
Yeah, I can certainly bring that up. I'm not sure if they've had any contact with the DNR or whomever would handle that. It might even be environmental health. But I'm not sure, but I'll mention that.
Even the sanitary district to be aware of it,
Sure.
they're the guardians of the lake.
Yeah.
And I think, one comment, as far as like the extensions and the deadlines and things like that, and take this to the county if you deem it, but perhaps some proof of some of these, so if there's an out-of-town emergency, documentation of the same, before consideration of extension. Not just a button, knowing a button that has previously worked.
Yeah, I just don't know the legality of that. If,
I don't either, but I'm throwing it out there, and
Sure.
that's for someone else who's,
Yeah.
knows more about this than I do.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly had other violators who have provided their medical information to me and like willingly just said, we have appointments, and like gave me my chart of appointments. And I did not keep it with, if there was an open record, I would not have included that with an open record request because it's personal information that, but I don't know as far as, if we can say like, prove it,
Well, and I don't know if it was an out-of-state, I guess the first thing when you said an out-of-state family emergency doesn't necessarily mean it's for him individually.
Sure,
It's just, an emergency
Yeah.
has a lot of different hats.
for sure.
For different people.
Yeah.
So that's just my.
Yeah. Got it.
Other questions for either Cassie or Emma? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion, for consideration and recommendation to Waukesha County on a request to consider the retention is denied. So just to be clear, because it's denying the ability to consider. Everyone's 100% clear on what we're doing here. And then the next meeting is June 2nd, 2026 at 6:30 p.m.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good evening, everyone.